today?
Good morning, Monica, and you're on the air.
I didn't get to hear the beginning of what you were saying, but what I've been hearing, everything that you're saying, I agree with.
Okay.
About the school situation, like what you was just saying about how she said she had people in favor of the schools closing, and
yeah.
It would be nice to know if that could be public knowledge or even on the website to actually see the actual numbers.
Well, to be fair, I don't think that anytime somebody calls into the school board, they give them the third degree about who are you, where you're from, that kind of deal.
Right.
I do think that there are people that are opposed to their schools closing. I guess what I'm saying is I think there is a group out there that says, well, if they don't close Dennett Road and they don't close Kitzmiller, who's next? I do think that there is some of that out there. I'm not naive enough to think that people don't think that way.
Right. Well, I mean, we feel that way because last year they closed Bloomington, and then this year Kitzmiller and Dennett Road. So that's 3 schools in 2 years.
Right.
And then in their long-term 5-year plan, Friendsville was mentioned. They're safe this year, but in 3 or 4 years they have Crowland on the budget to be closed.
Right. And that's I think there's some of that out there. Now, Monica, I know because we talked the other evening, you're with the Dennett Road.
That is correct.
Preservation Group.
Yes.
And as we were talking there, the sentiment I got was that members of your group feel used, that you went down to Annapolis to testify in favor of getting this additional funding, and there's no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
That is correct. I was writing down some notes to say a little bit ago, and like Sue Wagner had said, I believe the date was April 24th, when they was to give the fate of the schools being open or closed, and she started the meeting that it was to be a celebration. But then she said the money did not come in from the state. However, the beginning of this week, that money came through.
Yeah.
And then we had the Board of Ed meeting on Wednesday night. So we're all thinking, okay, we're safe. The money came through. However, they still closed us.
Yeah.
So that was kind of hard to understand, to accept. And then the other thing is they told Dennett Road, I actually called Sue Wagner, and she was very good about it. I went up and talked to her for approximately 2 hours one day.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a lot of questions, and she was good about answering them. And one of the questions I asked was, why would you close Dennett Road when we're the second largest elementary school? She said, because we cost the most money. We have the most staff. And I see that point. However, part of our staff is for special ed. So they're saying that we're closed because we have so much staff. But to my knowledge, none of our teachers lost their job. Some of the assistants did. So I'm doing the math. The figures don't add up. The teachers were saved.
Well,
schools are closed, but where are we going to put all these teachers? We're minus several classrooms. It doesn't add up.
Well, what my understanding is that if you had seniority, you could bump other teachers to the layoff list. So if you're teaching at Dennett Road and you had seniority and they're shutting down Dennett Road, so let's say there's a younger teacher at Grantsville,
mm-hmm.
and that teacher would get the layoff instead of you because you had more seniority in the system.
Right. And I understand that, but we talked to several different teachers from several different elementary schools, and from what we've seen, it was more assistants that lost their jobs, not many teachers. They give numbers on teachers that we won't have this year. A couple of the positions will be, I guess, they won't refill, but other people will take that position with whatever job they have. And then we had, several retire. So those are jobs that won't be replaced.
Right.
But when you look clear across the board, actually overall, nobody wants to lose your job, and I understand that.
Right.
But what they were telling us, they closed us because so many people having job staff. But when you look clear across the board, actually there wasn't a lot of teachers that lost their positions. So that really still doesn't make sense to us parents at Dennett Road.
Right. Well, I understand where you're coming from there. I can tell you that if you look at any school, if you closed any school in the county, the money it takes to operate the facility is a lot less than to pay the salaries in the building.
Correct.
So I don't think it's ever been a question of that the school itself is in such dilapidated condition that we have to shut this one down. Now, I do think there's something out there that if you're making a decision and you're looking at Dennett Road and Southern or Broadford Elementary and Yock Glades as potentials. The other two buildings are newer, so it makes more sense to shut down the older school. I think there's something to that. But,
right, and I see where that's coming from.
Yeah, but my main problem is that it's okay to reach an unpopular decision, but and if you missed the beginning of it, what I was saying to our people in our listening audience was that you have to go through the process in the public meeting. I don't think you can go and cut everything down and make it nice and neat and put a bow on it and then trot it out and like what was done the other night. I just don't think, and the state law seemingly backs up my point of view. I thought that they had, if people show up, you might be uncomfortable having the discussion, but daggone it, it's a public board.
That's correct. I mean, the other night I also, and I know there were several other parents from Bennett Road that even thought, because on the agenda, Stu Wagner was allotted for 1 whole hour.
Right.
It only took approximately about 15 minutes. We was under the impression that we would get to hear, I believe there was 4 fiscal budgets that she had for the Board of Ed to listen to.
Right.
We only heard the one they chose. Now, we felt that we should have been able to hear all 4 scenarios.
Right.
And then they could go into public comment. We understood, not public comment, they go into their closed session.
Yeah. And that's what I think is the proper process. Mm-hmm. If the superintendent has 4 options to consider, put those options on the table, then let me hear what you think of them as board members. And, there is no presupposition that you have to listen to the public even. But you have to do it in public. You cannot, you can't do it in the back and then come out and I just don't like that process. And if you like that process, I don't know why you would, unless you're on the board and you're afraid to go out and do it in public. Mm-hmm. So I don't know.
Another thing
go ahead.
You talked about was a petition.
Yeah.
You was right. In 10 days, several people had it, went around. It was just a little under 2,500 signatures.
Okay.
And that was asking for a revote if the money come in from the state. And I didn't clearly understand it. I mean, I knew what it meant, but I didn't understand why when we asked the questions at the board meeting prior to this one, the one last week, when we handed them the petitions, we get no comment. We didn't get no feedback. No positive, no negative, nothing was said. They went on to their business. Well, then I later learned, and if I'm wrong, if you can quote me, that the reason it was not brought up for a revote was one of the elected board members that was in favor of the school's closing had to bring it up as a revote. Is that correct?
I had heard something similar. I'm not so sure that, look, I didn't ask that question, and I wasn't in the right department with the Attorney General to ask that question yesterday. Apparently they got that advice from the State Board of Education, I've heard through back channels. But I would think that anybody on that board can make a motion on anything they wanted to. Mm-hmm. Like if Rodney Durst, who came out against the school closing, if he wanted a petition or make a motion for reconsideration, he could make that. I don't know why he could not do that. I'm not blaming it on him, mind you.
Right.
But what I'm saying is that if you're on a board and you want to make a motion, well, it can die for lack of a second, but I don't think you are prohibited from making a motion. That just doesn't sound right either. Right.
But it was just kind of brushed off, you know what I mean? Like, we really had a lot of hope into it, and we put a lot of time into it because we thought it would be meaningful, but we got no comment. So
right, and that was bothersome too, that that there was this little comment as there was during the meeting, not from the public. There were 3 speakers from the public, but those speeches came before the presentation of options and the single option then. And then after that, there wasn't time set aside for commentary. It just doesn't set well with me that the process was. I'll use the word mangled for an intent of somebody for whatever reason they didn't want to do this in public.
Right. Now, I agree.
I think that's the big argument I have with it. At the end of the day, if you want to come down and you want to have the debate about, hey, we got to close schools now or we're going to have to close them next year and we'd like to get some stability going for 3 years, okay, make that argument.
Right.
But the argument that I've heard for several months has been we don't have the money to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to balance our budget. Absolutely agree with that.
Right.
But once you get the money in and you want to change tack, you have to have that discussion in public.
Right.
There's no, and again, if somebody's out there wants to disagree with that, call me now, 301-334-4272, 301-334-3800.
But basically, to sum it up,
yeah.
It's hard to understand. They closed schools. They said because of money. Well, the night that they made the decision to close the schools, from my understanding, I had spoke to Mr. Reilly that day on the phone prior to the meeting, and that's the day the commissioners had given the Board of Ed an additional $500,000.
Right.
And I understand, which is very hard to accept, that they cannot have the Board of Ed. They can't say where the money is spent or what it goes on. But in the newsletter, and it was out to the public, that they give them the $500,000 in hopes that it would not close any school. Mm-hmm. And I even read that night at the meeting for everybody here that hadn't heard that statement. Then they still closed the schools. And even last year, the county commissioners gave, I forget the amount of money, to keep Bloomington and Kitzmiller open, and they still closed Bloomington last year. It's just hard to understand. I understand we're supposed to be in a recession, and everybody has to watch what they spend.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be in a budget. But
Right.
it seems like the board keeps getting money. It's all in favor for the kids to have the smaller classrooms, which is something that's a big concern. And I was told this fall already that Broadford is supposed to have 5 second-grade classrooms. I can't imagine. The kids, it's going to affect the kids, just like you said, not just in Kitzmiller and Dennett Road. It's going to affect all elementary schools southern end of the county because there are going to be more students in classrooms, and it's going to be harder for them to learn.